Hello and welcome to A Gypsy's Kiss, the vlog. I'm Shelley Carney.
And I'm Toby Eunice. Stick with us a couple of seconds and I will tell you where to find the home of Brown.
Okay, well, that is a burning question. Most people will tell you they don't know where the home of Brown is. They don't know what it is, where it is, how to look for it. So this should be very informative today.
Actually, Forrest tells us nobody knows where the home of Brown is because he tells us all the time that the people have gotten the first two clues and then go past the rest of them. So, yeah, I think a lot of people imagine that they know where the home of Brown is. But again, once you get your boots on the ground, life changes. So first, let me tell you what I think the home of Brown is or is not.
Okay.
All right. And we've talked about these before. So, so number one, I don't believe the home of Brown is a house or a structure of any kind, physical structure.
Because they just don't last.
No, they're not going to be around for any period of time. Secondly, it's not the home of Brown is not related to a person living or dead. That is, it's not Dave Brown, it's not Ranger Brown, it's not Bob Brown, it's not any person living or dead.
Well, I know how hard it is sometimes to find out who things are named after. Brown's Canyon, for example. We asked everybody in Salida. They didn't know.
And that's recent. That's within the past 150 years. Well, I mean, literally, we asked the person, I forgot his name,
Dick Dixon.
Dick Dixon, who was supposed to be the expert on the area's history.
He's written 2 books on the area.
Yeah, didn't know who Brown's Canyon, Brown's Warm Springs, Brown's...
He's been searching for that answer for years. So...
I believe that the home of Brown is readily visible from a distance of 500 feet. Yeah.
Well, Fenn has told us we can find the first 2 clues on a map, but not the third clue, which
That's right.
is the home of Brown. So you have to be there to see it.
You have to have boots on the ground. And he said that people have been within 500 feet of the treasure. I'm sorry. Right. He said that people have been within 500 feet of the treasure and searchers have been within 200 feet of the treasure. So that means it has to be readily visible from a distance of 500 feet. It is geologic.
I agree with that.
What gives it its life, its length of life.
Right.
Because it was here 100 years ago. It was here 1,000 years ago. My belief, it was actually here between 35 million and 100 million years ago, and will be here 100 years from now, unless there's some sort of Yellowstone volcanic disaster. And most importantly, it's not brown.
Not brown.
The home of Brown is not brown.
It's not brown. It's not brown with a small b.
That's right. It's not that brown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good one. You noticed that, huh? That's good. Wait a minute. What's that shirt that you're wearing?
Oh, that's my Gypsy's Kiss shirt. It says, "Look for me in the mountains, somewhere north of Santa Fe."
So we have a Gypsy's Kiss merchandise now?
Yeah, see? Here's our logo. Boop.
And where can people find our A Gypsy's Kiss merchandise?
Oh, Zazzle.com/A Gypsy's Kiss. That's our little store.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So we'll make a little bit of money on that to pay for our travels.
I hope so.
So we'd appreciate it if you go by our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/products/ Zazzle.com/A Gypsy's Kiss. /products.
Homepage, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see some nice things there. We've got a bunch of different things in the store, if you will. Yeah, very nice. Looks good on you. Back to our home of Brown.
It's not brown with small b.
It's not brown. Yeah. So I have to go back to Eric Sloane. Right? And I have to describe Eric Sloane in the context of Forrest Fenn. Eric Sloane was an artist.
Right.
He knew Forrest from 1975 to 1985 when he passed away. The last book he wrote was called 80. And we mentioned was it either last episode or a couple of episodes ago, that the reference to 80, the age of 80, at the age of 80, was not to Forrest Fenn, but to Eric Sloane. In addition to that, Forrest mentions him in other places in The Thrill of the Chase. He also mentions him, he dedicates a whole chapter to him in Too Far to Walk.
Right.
And he has mentioned him and dedicated at least one scrapbook that I'm aware of to Eric Sloane. So he had a very solid relationship with him that went even further beyond that. So Eric Sloane is important in the context of all of this. Eric Sloane wrote the book, his last one. It was published in 1985 when he was, quote, almost 80, unquote. It was the story of his life, words, images, paintings, and sketches. And what I was fascinated by is that the sketches look very much like the sketches, the style of sketches that are in Fenn's book, The Thrill of the Chase and Too Far to Walk. Although Sloane didn't sketch the drawings in Fenn's books. They were done by somebody else, but it almost looks like Fenn took some Eric Sloane sketches to his artist and said, render them after this. What's even more interesting is that in 2007, 22 years after Sloane's death, Fenn wrote a tribute to Eric Sloane entitled $17 a Square Inch.
Mm-hmm. And that's the same name as the chapter in Too Far to Walk.
Too Far to Walk.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he pick $17 a square inch?
Well, that's how he charged for Eric's paintings. He charged by the square inch. He charged $17 a square inch because that was the right amount. He always figured out what amount he could get for a particular artist, and that was the amount. And Eric Sloane wasn't very happy with that particular way of pricing paintings, but that's how it works.
Until 1 year's worth of not being able
owner.
to sell a lot of paintings, and he asked Fenn to go back to it. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting story that's very characteristic of the relationship between Fenn and Sloane. Fenn being Sloane's, what do they call him, agent, effectively, but getting his paintings sold. And Sloane was very prolific. I mean, he could paint 3 paintings in a day, and so he always had a stock of them, and they were always available. So I was actually kind of surprised that he could get as much for them, because in a market of supply and demand, you'd think the more paintings that he had, the less valuable they would be. Sloane didn't. Sloane was always producing more paintings and making more money from them.
Well, it was a good relationship, with having Forrest representing him and selling his paintings for him, so that all he had to do was paint.
Exactly. Yeah, and meet Forrest for lunch. So in Sloane's book, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll leave it up here long enough so that you guys can read it. But he talks about the color brown. And this was interesting for a variety of reasons, how he describes the color brown. But more importantly, then Fenn took this exact quote and put it into his book, $17 a Square Inch, where he's describing Sloane. So it was an important quote to both of them. I'll read it. Brown is a neglected color. The dictionary says it is any group of colors between red and yellow. Go into any art store and try to find a tube of brown paint. You'll find sienna, Van Dyck, which he spells correctly in his book. It's named after Anthony Van Dyck, the Flemish artist, that 1600s. And I'm highlighting it because it was the only color of brown paint that's mixed case. The other colors, madder, umber, and ochre, never just are plain dark or light brown. It is the color of autumn, and I like it so, and here's what I thought was important, so I thought I'd give brown a special distinction and do a painting in shades of brown. Of course, I use tubes of sienna, Van Dyck, madder, umber, and ochre because he can't find or buy light or dark brown. But both Sloane experimented with it for a couple of years. As did Van Dyck. Was actually known for the manner in which he used brown. There's a very famous self-portrait of Van Dyck that's got reds and blues and yellows and oranges, but you can see the brown influence in almost every color on that painting, including the blue as it fades into the background. So that's why Van Dyck got the name. Now, the paint that Van Dyck... So then comes Fenn to write his poem. He comes along, writes the poem, first stanza, second stanza, beginneth where warm waters halt, and finishes it off with this line, put in below the home of brown, and he makes it uppercase. My impression of making it uppercase is twofold. Number one, he wanted to give brown a special distinction, and that was a combination of things. The special distinction was that brown was... I guess I could describe it as a favorite of Sloane's. Brown in this poem is a subtle tribute to Eric Sloane. That's the way you have to see it. And that puts it into a category not of houses, trout, what other browns have we talked about?
People's last name.
People's last names. It puts it into the category of color. And I think that was the point that Fenn was trying to make. Not only a tribute to Sloane in the middle of the poem, the capitalization of the word brown, but the indication that it might be, because it was related to Sloane, a color rather than anything else brown could be imagined to be. So the question is, where does Van Dyke Brown come from? And I think it was interesting that in Sloane's quote, the only word that he put in mixed case, as I said earlier, was Van Dyke. And then when Fenn put brown into the poem, he also made that the only word, other than the words that start the beginning of each sentence. He made that the only word in the poem of mixed case. So I put Van Dyke together with brown, which makes sense from an artist's perspective because you can actually buy a two. As a matter of fact, you remember Bob Ross?
Of course.
The guy that used to paint on PBS?
Of course.
His favorite color was Van Dyke Brown because he could mix it with anything.
And that was his hair color.
Right. And that was his hair color to boot. Van Dyke Brown is a pigment, like most pigments, comes from earthy tones. Like most pigments in that range comes from earthy tones. It contains iron and manganese, and it's mixed with lignites usually. A brown earthy substance found in peat and lignite beds. Now, they were famous because they were found in Germany, where he used to buy his Van Dyke used to buy his pigment from. Some pigments labeled Van Dyke Brown are bituminous earth, and that means earth that's mixed in with things like bituminous coal. Now, the challenge for these types of earth is that the earth on the North American continent that contains the lower ranges of coal, the less expensive variants of coal like lignites, occurred in between the end of the Cretaceous period and the beginning of the Paleocene. That puts them in the range of about 100 million years old, buried under the ground, and all these additional 100 million years worth of layering above them. And there was also a big extinction event where we lost all the dinosaurs. That was the period 65 million years ago, where we lost all the dinosaurs. And curiously, it was also the period between, I'm going to say 145 million and 85 million years ago, where the warm waters of the western inland sea receded. And that part of the country, effectively Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, all the way from the Arctic to the Gulf of Mexico, were not under the warm seas. So a lot was happening right here, and some of that resulted in the failing of various ecological systems that resulted in coal and petroleum. And it happened right around here. The challenge is that that's underground, deep underground for the most part, and you can get to it in two ways. Way number one is you dig one of those big holes in the ground that goes in an
open pit mine.
An open pit mine. Mm-hmm. I never remember what they're called. I know that sounds strange, but the open pit mine where you spiral down into the ground until you reach the coal-bearing earth, and then you bring it up on those massive trucks. The other option is kind of like they do it in places in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, where the tectonic action has forced that category of earth up above the ground, and they can mountaintop it. That is, they cut off the top of the mountain, and the coal is basically sitting there waiting for them to. It's not very good on the surrounding ecology environment, but it is certainly something that was done for a long time. So what you need to assume if you're looking for these lignites associated with Van Dyke Brown is that, as is in the Wind River Range, the Cretaceous period is represented by the green. The green would be under the Quaternary and the Tertiary, which represents approximately $100 million worth of layering.
100 million what?
100, what did I say?
Dollars.
I meant years. 100 million years worth of Earth's action on top of that. But because along, especially the Wind River Range, places in Colorado, places in New Mexico, there's been this tectonic action, and the plates have pushed each other up, revealing these in mostly mountain valleys. So you can see the Cretaceous the channel that makes up Cretaceous Earth. And what's even going to be more interesting is the older areas of Earth are going to be above it, and the newer areas of Earth are going to be below it. So you can actually look at the side of a mountain and see the Cretaceous period, especially if you're looking at a mountain range that has a flat layer, not a climbing wall, a cliff. What's another? If you're not at the top and talking about a cliff, it's just a flat surface to go down, and you can basically measure which epoch is represented on that Earth. So you have to find the places, if you're in Wyoming, for example, along the Wind River Range, where this might have occurred. And generally speaking, you're looking for a U-shaped valley that was formed as the result of glaciation, as opposed to a V-shaped valley shaped by a river. Because in order for a valley to be shaped by a river, it has to be a pretty significantly sized river. And the green on the far side of the Wind River Range would be a good example of that. The Rio Grande, as we know here in New Mexico, is a classic example of that. It's not a stream. It's a full-blown river that comes springtime. When the melt comes along, it gets even bigger. So you're not looking for that kind of valley. You're looking for a valley that has the subtlety of the U shape that leads back up into, and you know how glaciers are formed at a kind of arrow point. So as you get higher up the valley, there's less and less of that activity. Right, so the walls are sharp when it transitions from a V shape at the top of the valley to a more of a U shape at the bottom, where all the glaciation took place. So what you're looking for is a valley that looks like this, and it has these characteristics. It has that rounded shape. Now, this is a European valley, which is older than our valleys here in the Rockies. These date back 250 million years. Ours are much younger than that by at least half. But you can see it has that rounded U shape, and then as they go higher up the valley, the flat wall faces, the rock faces, exposed rock faces, and then further up the valley, the more of the V shape, because the glacier didn't get all the way up there. So that's what you're looking. And what you're looking for in those valleys is a lignite or peat deposit. It is likely that the peat will have been petrified by that time, but not having been there long enough to form a petroleum. But you know as well as I do, you can burn peat. Mm-hmm. So the process of petroleumization has started in peat. It finishes it's halfway through in coal, and then finishes in actual crude oil. So what you're looking for, it may not even be this big, but my guess is that what you will find is the home of brown in a coal, especially lignite deposit, in a valley that has a U shape in one of the Rocky Mountains. And you're at the home of brown, and as I said, that's visible from at least 500 feet away. You'll be able to see it. Now you have to put in below that, interestingly enough, Fenn's multidimensional mind. Mm-hmm. You're putting below that in both physical distance and time. You're putting in below a time when this occurred. That's where you'll find the home of brown.
Okay.
And I'm not going to tell you where I think those are.
Okay.
We've got to leave something to the searchers. That's my friend David Brown. No, that's my friend David Brown. He's over there in the home of brown. He likes to call it his place, and he refers to it as the home of brown.
Okay.
So there. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's the home of brown. So for those of you who are still wondering and looking for the home of brown, now you know where it's at, so go get it.
Go find it.
Go get it.
Because at that point, if you can see the home of brown, you are 500 feet away from the treasure. And because it has that geologic component, because I believe the blaze has the geologic component, the home of brown and the blaze could be literally, in my opinion, on the same rock face. Mm-hmm. So there we go.
And we know Forrest had a love of geology.
He did.
And excavation and that sort of thing. So yeah,
He understood it. That's what's important.
Well, he's got a library,
Yeah.
He talks about his library books, and he's got a
And it
big
fits in with
section
that
on
model of the poem that we talked about several episodes ago of 4 dimensions, the 3 dimensions of space and the 1 dimension of time. This is definitely the dimension of time.
Mm-hmm.
Space.
Yeah. So
You can fly there.
you can fly to the home of Brown
Yeah.
in this plane for only $9.99.
You have 29 seconds to close this part of the show.
Okay. So our next show, which should be coming up later this week, we're going to be talking about an airplane. And I hope that you'll tune in. And thank you so much for watching today and learning about the home of Brown. For Gypsy's Kiss, the blog, I'm Shelley Carney.
I'm Toby Eunice. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next show.
Bye-bye.